It's funny. I was gonna sit here and I had this idea to talk about the accomplishments of my communities, the internationals and the Asians, specifically the South Asians. I was gonna talk about how we're overcoming these difficulties successfully in the US, both at an institutional level, with facing harsh laws on immigration, and on a personal level, where we experience difficulties every day that we live in the US. And my talk was going to be about persevering through these barriers. But I don't know anymore. Do I believe that there are immigrants who come into this country and who embody this American philosophy of like, you can work hard and then you will succeed? Yes, absolutely I do. In fact, it's celebrated in my country. Like, take India, for example, where you have the press and the journalists putting out articles after articles of successful South Asians who like left their country and came to America, pursued the American dream, and succeeded. And what this has done is actually bring in this huge generation of people who want the same thing, and they want to be part of that community. They want to feel that success and be a successful immigrant, or should I say, model minority. I'm kind of calling myself out on this one because I also fell for the model minority trap when I came to the US. I thought I had to change the way I talk, change the way I behave, and in order to fit in with my American peers. And in a weird way, I felt like I had to exceed expectations in academics, extracurriculars, sports, whatever I did. But why did I need to do that? Why did I feel like I had to change who I was in order for my friends to accept me? Would that in some way give me my American identity? Let me give you another example. I was talking to my dad recently, and he was telling me about his friend who came to the US in the 80s. And he had this whole idea of becoming that successful immigrant. And when he came here, he decided that he was going to be as American as possible. So he essentially changed his whole identity and kind of like took on what he thought was American from American TV shows that he saw in India. And it took him 2 years, like nearly 2 years, to even begin to realize that people here did not treat him the same. But what was different? For all intents and purposes, he was as American as anyone else. Well, maybe not, because I feel like there's a parenthesis with the word white written right in front of the word American. And that was the same reason why my parents decided to take me back home to India. I was born in the US, but they took me back home because they said they didn't want me to live life like a second-class citizen. It would be naive of me to not bring in race into my talk, because this is a racially powered society. We're a land of immigrants, though, and then we have so much diversity in the US. Well, for persons of color, diversity is nothing but a pronoun. For us, diversity means being subordinated, or using the model minority to sort of exploit us in a way to change the narrative of racism. Let's not forget that this is the same country, this has the same people who wanted to build that wall. Half of the Americans in this country wanted to build that wall. And these are the same people who exist in positions of power in this country, who control the narrative and they control the law. And these people have been exploiting us for hundreds of years. Let me give you an example. I mentioned my dad's friend in the 80s, and he moved to New York in the New Jersey area in the early 90s, late 80s. Back then, there was a hate group in New Jersey called the Dot Busters, and their whole reason of existence as a hate group was to beat up anyone who had a dot on their forehead. Well, if they'd done their research, they'd know it's not a dot, it's actually a bindi that women in India wear. Not India, you know what, I'll change it. Hindu women traditionally wear that dot on their forehead. But then a few years later, Madonna used those same dots on her forehead and suddenly it's fashionable. Where were the dot busters then? Well, the dot busters didn't really care about the dots. That was just something catchy that people would join them because they're the dot busters. Essentially, they wanted to beat up South Asians. And that's messed up. The Dot Busters was just one of many examples that I could have used, but I want to be mindful to not open up wounds for my fellow POCs. Let's not forget, just a week ago, there was a shooting at a spa in Georgia. Asian hate crimes have gone up 150%. Hundreds of people have been injured at Black Lives Matter protests, and I don't even want to begin to count the number of people who've lost their lives in racially charged police brutality events or just the like. But then the so-called true Americans who wanted to negate these, who tried to justify these events, they felt what POCs have been feeling for 30 seconds, and then they stormed the Capitol. That's a brittle spirit. How quick were they to change the narrative from model minorities to blaming the coronavirus on Asian Americans? That mindset needs to be changed, and that mentality needs to be changed. And also, immigrants should not feel the need to assimilate into this country. Rather, we should be accepted for who we are. I don't really have a concluding statement for this talk because this isn't a conclusive argument. I am in no way an expert on any of these matters, but I'm definitely someone who cares. So I'll leave you with this. To my Asian peers, I encourage you to open up to family, friends, whoever, and share your story, share your voice, because it needs to be heard. Embodying the model minority myth it can take a huge toll on your mental health, and it's just a trap that sucks you in. Talk to your elders, talk to your youngsters, and explain to them the context that they're being raised in and the costs of assimilation. To my white peers, I call on you to listen to your Asian peers. I call on you to open up your mind, maybe make it a little less Americentric, and fight with us and stand with us as we're challenging these systems of oppression that your ancestors have set up. And work with us to break through these boundaries, because we're ready to oblige. The question is, are you? Thank you. That's my talk.